Well, hello, welcome to this Media Firestarter class on how to be a great podcast guest. My name is Angel Tuccy. I am a media matchmaker, a media exposure specialist, and I have been interviewed on probably over 200 podcasts over the last few years. And I have been on the other side of it. My background is in radio and broadcasting. I have interviewed over 5,000 guests and hosted over 2,500 broadcasts. I'm also the author of the book, Amplify Your Reach, How to Use Podcast Interviews as the number one traffic source for growing your business. I'm a great big fan of being a podcast guest. And for the last many, many years, I have been touting the mantra of 2 interviews a week. 2 interviews a week. 2 interviews a week puts you in front of 50 new audiences every 6 months or 25 audiences every quarter. Imagine what that can do for the trajectory of your business. It's really good for the mental health of your business. Think about it. If you were scheduled to speak as a podcast guest and have it scheduled on your calendar every week to speak about the thing you love to talk about the most, the thing you're most passionate about every single week, think about what that would do to the mental health of your business, right? You're excited. It gives you a reason to get up in the morning. Even as an entrepreneur, we know it can be a roller coaster of ups and downs and highs and lows, but you will show up for that podcast interview. And I promise you, at a cellular level, this is going to change how you grow your business, let alone the ongoing the benefits of getting in front of a new audience, perfecting your message, making an even bigger impact, connecting with podcast hosts who are connected to your target audience, and all the good stuff that comes from planting this seed. The ongoing effect, because podcast interviews are evergreen, which means somebody can listen to it next week, next month, next year. It stands the test of time. It's not just a one and done. When I was traveling as a speaker, or even as a radio show host, if you listen to my radio show and I was interviewing a guest, if you were in the car and you happened to grab it, fantastic. But if you weren't, and that radio interview was over, that was it. It was a one shot, right? You had one flash in the pan, one opportunity to hit that audience at that key moment. If I'm speaking on a stage somewhere, I get to hit that audience in that one moment. As a podcast guest, I can now share, it's recorded, right? I can now share this. I can repurpose this. I can repost this. Somebody can listen next week, next month, next year. And the impact is, it like compounds. So if you go and you Google, right, if you go to listennotes.com and you look up Angel Tuccy and all my podcast interviews, it's like a waterfall, a cascade of all of these opportunities to continually impact my target audience, attract more leads, and make an even bigger impact. So I'm so excited because right now there's an overwhelming outpour cry from podcast hosts who need quality guests, right? People who aren't just there to kind of just spam them, sell to their audience, who show up late, who don't show up at all, who don't promote the show, right? Who aren't marketing, who don't have a call to action. They don't have a good lead magnet. They don't have an affiliate link. They don't have any of the assets, right? They're looking for quality guests. So our goal here is to set you up to give you all the assets that you need so that you can go and become a great podcast guest. And I'm so excited. I'm so excited to share this with you. A few simple strategies that are going to completely elevate your podcast guesting game. Number one, actually, I'll go through them all. We're going to talk about pre-show prep in order to stop the jitters. I don't know about you, but I used to have a great fear of public speaking. I find being a guest on a podcast kind of eliminates that because it's a conversation, it's a dialogue between two people. I don't just have to stand up on stage and have something prepped and prepared, all eyes on me. It's a little bit more comfortable for me, but I'm also going to give you just a pre-show prep to stop the jitters. Number two, we're going to talk about seeding, like planting seeds, seeding your call to action so that you can develop more leads from every podcast interview. We're going to talk about reframing questions when the host takes you off track, right? Maybe a question you weren't expecting, or it isn't the direction you thought the interview was going to go. So how do you reframe a question? The Fourth thing we're going to cover are mic drops, right? How do you grab the audience attention? How do you get them to take action? How do you draw them in even deeper into this conversation? And then finally, we're going to close off with what's the big idea. So I'm going to go through this. It's kind of, there's a lot to unpack here. You can stop and start and grab and go as you go. You don't have to sit through this all in one setting, right? Come back and do it as a 5-day masterclass in order to become an incredible podcast guest. So let's first talk about the pre-show prep to stop jitters. Like I said, when I was in high school, I had a fear of public speaking. I almost didn't graduate high school because of my parent, I would be paralyzed when I get up on stage or stand in front of my classroom of peers. All I had to do was describe how to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and my tongue dried up, my mouth dried up, my voice went away, butterflies. I'm shaking like a leaf, like it was embarrassing. Fortunately, my teacher gave me a D so I could pass and I could graduate just for showing up and making a complete fool of myself, right? So I understand, right, those pre-show jitters. Then I became a public speaker after I left broadcasting, standing up on stage and speaking in front of audiences I could now see their faces versus sitting in a radio studio where it was just me and my producer. I was just imagining I was talking to my mom the whole time. So very different. So I totally understand the jitters. But here's also what I discovered. Anxious and nervous is the same as excited, right? It's the same emotions, the same thing physically going on in your body. So when you feel anxious and nervous, it's actually the same physical thing that's happening. You are excited. So shift your energy. Rather than saying I'm nervous and I'm anxious about this, I am excited about this. Right? Thinking about just positioning yourself of the impact you're going to make, the people you're going to reach, the conversation you're going to have with that host. The other thing to think about is, if you're smiling, smiling is incredible. It also gives you a chance to breathe during your interviews, right? So you can slow down and smile. You can't smile while you're talking because it's kind of funny and it doesn't look normal and natural, but you can smile in between sentences, in between words, right? In between thoughts, right? And give yourself a chance to smile, gives you a chance to pause, also gives you a chance to breathe. Before you go on the show, if your energy just isn't quite there and you need a little boost, an energetic boost, because maybe you're tired, maybe you're running from something, right? And you just need to take a moment before you go live on camera with your host. You can physically make yourself laugh out loud, belly laugh. And so I used to do this on stage, and I would get my audiences to do this with me because one, it put them at ease. It also put me at ease as well. But when you laugh, like you can't be upset and worried if you're laughing. Like the two emotions cannot coincide at the same time, right? So while you are laughing, it is shifting the energy in your body. It is energizing your brain. It is taking away the jitters and you can do this anytime, right? In any place. You don't even have to have something funny, right? You can just physically laugh, like belly laugh. So I want you to do it with me. Oh my gosh, right? Right? Good tummy exercise too, right? Strengthen that core. Sit up tall, breathe in, make sure your diaphragm has space. When I was doing the morning show, I would get to the studio at 3:30 in the morning. I was exhausted, right? And for the first hour from 5 a.m. to 6 a.m., I had to do the show standing up because you could just tell the energy versus me sitting. So if you need to do it standing up, if you need to belly laugh, right? Get in, chest out, get a lot of space in that diaphragm, give yourself a good laugh, and remember to smile in between sentences. A few other things, right? To just make sure that you feel more prepared for the show. Research the show, do a little homework on the show, the host, some topics they've had, some guests that they've covered. Make sure you know their name when you get on the camera before you go live. If you're wondering, right, remind me your last name again. Remind me, how do you pronounce that? Right, go ahead and make sure that you know their name. Write it down. Have your notes in front of you, right? In most cases, you're sitting at home or in an office, right? A quiet place. You've got your notes in front of you. You're not going to use them to read But I've got little sticky notes, right, of little things, right, that I want to share in an interview, right? I might take and jot down some little notes. So these are my top 3 points that I want to make sure that I cover. And for every key point, I want to have a story that highlights that point and brings it home. And here's why stories are so sticky and why they make such a difference. Because we can listen to a whole bunch of interviews of how to be a great guest, right? Like, you know, 1, 2, 3, do this, right? We can look up the how-tos, but it's our stories that make your interview unique of why I'd want to listen to you. People come for the topic, but they stay for the people, right? They stay for your stories. So they'll come for the topic, but they'll stay for the host. They love the host's energy and how they interact. They love how the guest, right, answers the questions and is so vulnerable or real or authentic. Right? They're not looking for perfect. The audience isn't looking for perfect, and neither is the host. So remember that. You do you. As long as you have a quiet space, right, where there's no interactions and no distractions and or disruptions, that's what we're looking for. So if something happens or the cat walks across or the baby cries or the dog barks, don't sweat it, right? We all know that you're living life, right? And a lot of podcast hosts are living life too. So don't sweat it. But make sure that you do have a couple of examples of stories that you can share because that's what makes your podcast interview most unique and draws people into you. You want to practice your introduction on how you're saying hello, right? Who you are, what you do, how you help, right? So thanks so much for having me on. I'm so excited to be here to talk about how to be a great podcast guest, right? And then when you do introduce yourself, right? For those who don't know me yet, right? I specialize in podcast guesting, how to use podcast interviews as the number one traffic source to grow your business. Over the last 5 years, I've helped over 400 people achieve, getting booked on over 50 podcasts, 2 interviews a week. I'm also the author of the book Amplify Your Reach and the creator of the Media Firestorm program. Right? So you want to practice that. And if not, like have it written up until it gets more comfortable. I promise you, like just think of it as the first 50 interviews are practice, right? They're practice. You're going to get better. It's going to get easier. It's going to get simpler as you move along. The path is paved by walking on it. So get on the path and start walking, right? Just do it. You're going to learn pretty much everything you need to learn and what you need to process and how it's going to go. You're going to learn it just by doing it. The calming techniques, right, of deep breaths and smiling and standing up are critical. And then if you have a one sheet or your talking points, keep your notes in front of you. Just use bullet points, right? Don't write it out, don't read it. Even if you add inflection and you really try not to sound like you're reading, it always sounds like we're reading. So just be comfortable. Write out some bullet points, have some examples that you want to share, and that should help you get going. But I promise you, really, the number one way to get rid of the jitters is to just do it. In my first year after leaving radio and becoming a public speaker and traveling, I spoke on 100 stages. 100. It was either a stage, a virtual summit, a small group event, or a podcast. I counted everything where there was an audience, right, in that first year. So over 100 opportunities to really dial in on who I am, what my message is, who I want to impact, and really how to guide that conversation. And I know and I trust it's going to happen for you too. And it might seem a little awkward at first, but the best way, right, to get out those jitters is to take action. All right, number 2, seeding your call to action to develop more leads. What does this mean? We are leveraging podcast interviews to find our people, right? To get in front of our core audience, people who are interested in what we have to talk about and what we have to share. And so we really want to be able to lead them to connect with us and follow up with us. I'll tell you, when I was in radio, it was so funny. I would have these incredible guests on the show, and they had great talking points. They had their introduction down, right? They had their stories. They were super qualified. You could tell they were breathing. They were calm. They had it together. And at the end, I would say, okay, so how do we get in touch with you? How does our audience follow up with you? How do they get a copy of your book, right? All the closing questions, right? So number one, do not wait until the end of the interview to seed the fact that there's something more for them. If you have a book and you're using a podcast interview to promote your book, Bring the book with you, have it on camera, pull it up once in a while. Don't just say, I have the book, but call it by name, right? I wrote the book, Amplify Your Reach, using podcast interviews as the number one traffic source for growing your business. Right? Call it by name. In chapter 7, right, I cover this topic in depth, but I'm going to give you the tip here, right, in order to, so let's get this going, right? I have a whole section on tools that you need. I have a whole section on writing guest interviews or writing pitches, where to find interviews, right? Like I have a whole section on how to get booked, insider secrets. So you talk about that in throughout the interview in some of your answers. You don't have to wait till the end of the interview in order to mention your call to action, right? Your lead magnet, your freebie, where you're sending them to. Use phrases like, I talk about this, right? In my free guide and my checklist. When the people download my checklist, they get this. This is what they tell me their favorite thing is. And then there's more of this along the way. Making sure, right, that you've got a great call to action at the end and only one. How many? One. This is not a menu. You can follow me on Facebook. You can send me an email. You can check out my website. You can call my team, right? We offer private coaching. We offer group coaching. We have membership programs. Like this is not the time to launch into a menu. I think a lot of times as guests, we think we're doing the audience a favor by giving them multiple choice. Maybe they like social media. Maybe they prefer the phone. Maybe they prefer this, right? We think we're being a great guest by giving them that multiple choice. But in reality, too many options confuses the audience and they end up doing nothing. I didn't quite get, where do you want me to do? What's the best thing to do? Where do I start? What should I do? And poof, I'm out. One gift, one call to action. So here's what that would sound like, right? We wrote the book on it, right? Amplify Your Reach. If you want to be a great podcast guest and you actually want to convert those leads into more book sales calls, if you want to generate more business using podcast interviews, I wrote the book on it. You can go and grab a copy at my website, needaguest.com, right? Simple URL, simple call to action, exactly what they're going to get, and the value that's in it for them. So start with value in it for them, what's in it for them. And things like download my PDF, join my group, get my downloadable, get my get my PDF, like all of that. Those are not keywords, right? Tell them the result. Get booked on more podcasts every single week. Become an amazing guest. Get my insider secrets for being an amazing podcast guest when you download this, right? When you go to this URL. So make sure that you're giving the value, right? If it's got a name, we want to name it, and then an easy URL to get it. One clear next step, right? And it's got to be something the audience would jump over chairs to get, right? This is, they wouldn't miss out, right? Like you've got to play this up like it's the best thing since sliced bread. It's like the golden ticket. And if it's not a golden ticket, make it a golden ticket. What can you put in there that when people hear it, they're like, oh my gosh, really? You give that away? That's in there? Oh my, I've got to grab that, right? That's exactly what I've been looking for. That's exactly what I've been needing. And remember, these are your people. These are this is like you going into a stadium of a random audience and saying, if you want to be a guest on podcasts, stand up. If you are an entrepreneur, right, stay standing. If you have, if you are also the author of the book, stay standing, right? You're my people. Come here, right? And so they're out there, but we've got to draw them in by giving them exactly what they want and by identifying who it is that we're looking to serve. So make sure that you name your core avatar by description, not just small to medium sized businesses, but I help digital marketers, I help authors, I help coaches, I help moms who drink coffee, right? Like who do you help? People should get a vision and a visual of either that's me or that's somebody I know. So mention the benefit, not just the thing, right? Get 10 times more leads from your next podcast interview by downloading my free checklist at needaguest.com, right? So seed it throughout. Don't be weird about it. Don't try to sell products. Don't try to sell services. Don't try to, in my high level masterclass, we do this, or in my membership, we provide this. You can mention your offer, right? But your call to action is one thing. and really the first domino, right? What would be the first thing that people would invest in and buy with you? That would be the thing that I would lead with, right? And include in my story, right? And truly it's in your story where you get to introduce your products and services, right? Over the past number of years, I've helped over 200 clients get booked on 50 podcasts, two podcasts a week. I'm also the author of, you know, Amplify Your Reach and the creator of the Media Firestorm program, right? So that's in your story where you get to introduce your product, your program. But seed it early. Don't feel like you have to wait. Because a lot of times people will say, well, the host never asked me, or we ran out of time and I couldn't share. That's on you, right? You gotta mention it early and often. So that is seeding your call to action to develop more leads. You'll 5x, right? Your leads when you use this method, right? Versus what people might be doing, you might be doing now. Like you want to increase even more leads, you're sharing that podcast interview with your own on social media. If you want to 5x your leads, do this, right? Seed your call to action. Step number 3. We want to reframe questions when the host takes you off track. Right? Sometimes they just have their own agenda. If we don't provide questions up front and we just allow the conversation to just go where it will, and sometimes there's hosts, they're like, I just like to have a really organic conversation, a natural conversation, and just see where it goes, which is fine for them. But for you, we want to make the most of your time, right? And make sure that this is a valuable use of your time. And so we want to make sure that we stay in control without sounding controlling, right? We don't want to be ruffled. We don't want to, I wasn't expecting it. It's not what I thought you would ask me. Like, we don't want to be gruff. We're building great relationships with these hosts. These hosts, not only do they have the attention of their audience, they probably also have a social media following, and they probably also have a client list, and they probably also have an email list. They probably also have a network. Like, podcast hosting is one marketing platform they've decided to add to all the other things that they're doing. So if you only build relationships with the host and you build 50 relationships over the next 6 months with 50 hosts, game changers for marketing partners, right? That's who they are for you. Marketing partners. I market for you, you market for me, right? I'm going to bring valuable stuff to your audience. You're going to share it with your audience, right? And then I'm going to promote you and we're going to go tit for tat, right? Like, we're going to be partners in this. So we never want to just cut them off if they've got an agenda or the conversation goes another way. So what I like, the location, 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 like where I was, where I'm at, where I'm going, to reframe a question or to bring it up. It also allows you to tell a story, right? So if somebody says, Angel, gosh, um, you live in Orlando and you go to Disney all the time. Tell me about that. Or is it crowded during the summer? Like, is it humid? Is it hot? Are the lines long? I'm like, that is a great question. Let me tell you, before I moved down here to Orlando, I was growing, right? I was a digital marketer, I was a public speaker, helping authors and entrepreneurs get booked on podcasts, and realized I could do that from anywhere. And since my family lived here and I wanted to be closer to them, we uploaded and shifted, right, and relocated to Orlando. So now I actually get to host my boot camps here. I get to host my VIP sessions here. I've got a beautiful studio that overlooks, a lake and palm trees. And so, yes, it's hot. Yes, the crowds are long, but it's worth it because I've discovered I can work from anywhere and serve my clients from anywhere. So where I was, right? Used to live over there. Now I live over here, right? And this is what it's doing for my clients and how I'm serving it. So it brings it back. So always be able to reframe. What's interesting, right? And about how that connects to, right? So I've given you a couple of quotes, right? Or a couple of, talking points to get it back, right? That's a great question. Here's what I found, right? What's interesting is how that connects to, right? And just reframing it back to your stories. And remember, it's a conversation. So have the conversation, right? If they ask a question that's seemingly random, allow them to have that conversation and answer the question, but then bring it back to your goal and the direction you want the conversation to go to. And they'll keep up with you, right? They'll track with you for sure. Tip number 4. mic drops that grab the audience's attention. Now, here's the thing. I mean, you probably have different phrases, isms, and osophies, right, that you share all the time, right? Your own little quotes. Or maybe you have some acronyms that you've created, right? The gift acronym, right? Or you've got different things. The reason why using metaphors and quotes and acronyms and sound bites works is because it gets people to want to take notes, right? It gets them to want to take notes. What happens if they want to take notes is they now have their pen in their hand or their note taker open. So when you do share your call to action, they are ready. So you can use things like write this down, right? Here's a statement for you, or here's a myth that we're going to overcome, right? So you can share what I call bold, tweetable statements. Most people are doing this completely backwards, right? Something that just disrupts complacency. Like, wait a minute. I'm doing it wrong. I'm doing it backwards. Like this is how it's happening, right? They're expecting to get booked on podcasts and nobody's inviting them, right? Or they get on a podcast and they realize there was no direction. They didn't have a good call to action because they didn't have this strategy in place, right? So if you can create a bold statement, a bold promise, something that's tweetable, people will want to write it down. Also gives you clips, right, that the host can maybe pull out and reshare little short video clips, right, to share on social media, give you those little short reels. You can use memorable metaphors, use them as frameworks, right? You can also ask thought-provoking questions to the audience. Have you ever thought about if you're listening to a podcast, like how did this person get to be on that show? Right? I'm probably a better storyteller. Like maybe my story is more interesting. How did that person get there? Right? If you've ever asked yourself that, well, here are some things you can do. Here are some ways to get yourself onto your next podcast. So you can ask thought-provoking questions. But I love the idea of telling them, write this down, right? Having bullet points. Number one, number two, number three. ABC, this acronym, right? But make sure that, it's things that are getting them to really interact with you and be involved in the conversation. Because we think that it's a dialogue between the host and the guest, but really there's a third party in there, and that is the listener, the audience. And you don't necessarily want to address them as them, but as you, like that person that's listening in their earbuds. Do you know that really, if you want to connect, being a podcast guest is the way to connect the most deeply with your audience. And it's because they're listening with their earbuds, right? They're taking you on the go. They're doing other things, right? They're probably on a walk or they're commuting or they're working out, walking the dog, and they've got you in their earbuds. And so, because their body's physically doing something else, their brain is more actively engaged into what they're listening in. And so, their subconscious is taking in even more than the frontal lobe cortex, right? So, we think we're like talking here and we're getting in and they're paying attention, but we're actually connecting on an even more deeper level because we're in their subconscious because they're doing other things while they're listening to a podcast. It's long form content, right? They're not just seeing a scroll that's going by and just, quickly, scrolling away. And no, they're taking you with them and they're deeply impacted and they're engaged with it. And you're reaching them at a cellular level. You're in there directly in their mind, right? And so make sure that you include them in the conversation. Talk to them. Talk to them as if they're sitting in that room next to you or in that chair right next to you. When I was in radio, I used to just imagine that it was my mom that was listening, right? And when I'm talking to my mom, I'm not nervous talking to my mom. She's one of my biggest fans, my biggest cheerleaders. The cadence of my voice changes, my comfort level, like I'm relaxed and I'm more comfortable because it's familiar. So picture the perfect person, right, that you're going to be speaking to that's sitting in that chair with you, so that you can have these moments, right, to really help you to really relax, be more authentic, be more genuine, get out of your head, right? And just be you. Be the person that people want to follow. Be the person people want to connect with. Be the person people want to say, you've got to go and listen to that because that blew my mind. It changed my world. And I want to change your world too. Tell me if it impacted you the way it impacted me, right? They'll do a whole like book study on it, or right? Book club on it. All right. So make sure that you've got some acronyms, you've got some stories, you've got some bold statements, things that we can use as little baby clips, right? Viral clips to go and promote this show. The last tip I want to share is what's the big idea? And so for you, right, to be a guest, right, you came in with this because I want to share X, right? XYZ. I want to get booked on podcasts so that, right, you know what you want to share. You know the impact that you want to make. You know it. But what we really need is for the audience to have that shift, that aha moment, that holy cow, that's me, right? Like they're talking to me, this is impacting me. They need to have that aha shift happen in them to go, wow, right? That reached me. This is why podcasts are growing at such, incremental volumes, right? Or what's the exponential paces, because people can listen to them any topic on the go, wherever they are, grab and go. I mean, it's such an impactful way to reach people. But we want to make sure that there is a shift that is happening and that you are the one providing that happening for them. So when Jamie is doing his interviews, his big idea is about how he quit social media completely and went all in on podcasts. Now, when people hear that, they're like, wait, what? I hate doing social media. I feel like it's a chore. Like used to be we had to do 3 posts a day. Now everybody's doing 5. Like you just can't keep up and you just can't compete. Or you grew this all without ads. How did you grow your Facebook community from 10,000 people to 43,000 people in 2 years without ads? Because everybody else on social media is paying for ads to do it, and you did it organically by being a guest on podcasts, like doing guest interviews. So if you've got something that's this bold idea, this big shift, this internal, like, holy cow, like, what is that going to be for the audience? So, number one, there needs to be a clear problem, right? You need to present what the audience's clear problem is. And you know it because this is what you help your clients do, or this is what you address in your book, or this is what people always want to pick your brain about. Like, this is your superpower, right? You cover this all the time. You also need to have a big belief shift that has happened, right? So I used to do it this way, right? And I tried it over and over again. Ginny calls it, the magic elixir, right? Right? I fell down, right? And I kept trying it over and over again until I found this magic elixir, right? That pulled me out of it, right? But you need to have stumbled. You need to have struggled. I've hired coaches. I've spent money on. I've tried every diet, every fad, right? I've invested here, I've invested there. I bought every um, CD set on the market, right? For this, right? So what did you do? And what was the final, like that aha where you're like, oh my gosh, it's here right in front of me. It's the thing I naturally do that I thought everybody was doing. I thought everybody was getting booked on podcasts because I was. And in the beginning, I was using them as filler, right? I was a speaker on stage. And if I didn't have a stage, because my mantra was 2 a week, if I didn't have 2 stages a week that I was speaking on, I would backfill with a podcast interview. And it wasn't until the pandemic when there were no stages. There were only virtual events and podcasts. And then people were coming to me saying, Angel, my clients were coming to me saying, Angel, I don't need to be on radio, magazine, stages. I only want podcasts. There was just a shift happening around me. My group then hit 10,000 members. And I thought, I think I'm onto something. And so for 2 years, we went all in on only podcasts as our marketing platform. And that's how we used it to create revenue, to grow our business, to grow the group, to launch the Media Firestorm program. And now 2 years later, kick off Media Firestarter. So what was the big belief shift happening and the clear solution that you give them, right? So 3 things, right? Problem, big shift, solution. If you've got a big idea, a big bold promise, and now all I have to do is go to your clear call to action that you've been seeding throughout this entire interview, and you've showed stories, you've been vulnerable, you've had a great conversation. I'm taking action, right, as the audience, and that's what you want to have happen. So with just a little prep, right? A clear call to action and that confidence presence, right? You will deliver incredible value. You'll also generate real results. So remember, your next podcast interview isn't just a conversation, it's an opportunity to grow your brand, to build trust, to bring in leads, and to make an even bigger impact. So I've included in here also the best way to introduce yourself as a template that you can use to customize, take and swipe. I'm super excited to walk you through how to be a great podcast guest. You can go back through this, baby step it, right? Take it one section at a time, and I'll see you. I'll see you in the airwaves. I can't wait to hear your next interview on my favorite podcast. Cheers.